Hey, it's Tyler. I'm your host, and this is a good problem to have. Wanted to talk with you all today about relocation expenses. For those of you in medicine, you're going from undergrad to med school, if you went the traditional route, then med school to residency, residency to fellowship if you continue on training, and then on to attendinghood. There's a lot of relocating, and I see this as the biggest surprise, non-surprise expense. The reason why it's both is because you all obviously know that you're going to be moving at some point, especially obviously from school to residency and on to attendinghood. Even if you skip fellowship, you're moving at least 2 times within the contents of your medical training, right? Not to mention on the front end and the back end. So moving is just a part of life, and it's coming. But there's so much going on in your heads and so many things to factor in with managing life expenses while you're in training, as well as just trying to get the most out of your training, that it comes as a surprise to a lot of doctors where all of a sudden they've racked up $4,000 or $5,000 of credit card debt when they move to fellowship. And so I wanted to talk about that reality, as well as a couple of modest things that could be done. It's not something that everyone can do, because a lot of doctors who don't come from any financial means, you may very well be behind the 8 ball already because you went into credit card debt just to transition from medical school to residency, right? And so playing catch up with credit card debt while you're in residency, some of the steps may not be possible, or they may be limited in some cases. But I just want to talk about the concept of preparation, and each of us has to do the best that we can with our circumstances, right? First, let's talk about why it's so challenging. Aside from what I've already mentioned, it's a surprise, and it comes up regularly, and all the while there's a storm of other things going on in your minds. It happens multiple times. So, and I've moved a lot in my life, but that was a choice. It was a choice that I made in the moment and had time to prepare. I think it's a bit different with this because it's med school 4 years later, residency 3 years later, fellowship 2 years later, attendinghood or whatever. And it's very rapid. So that's a challenge. Another thing is that with all these expenses, there's no tax breaks. It used to be that there could be some things that are tax deductible. And there are some situations where moving expenses can result in a tax deduction, but the circumstances have to be just right. And for physicians, it generally does not apply. So I'm not even going to jump into that detail, because it won't apply. But even when it does, it's not that major of a difference. You're just kind of on your own. You're like, I got to pay for moving truck. I've got to pay the deposit, maybe first and last month's rent on the next place, and other things that come up, licensing fees, and even short-term housing. If you can't get where you want to be permanently at the outset, there's just a lot of things that add up. So, and then that's not to mention that you've got your loans that are, that you're carrying on your back. So there's expenses, life expenses that just keep coming, and then you've got these moving expenses. So it's very challenging. Let's talk about some numbers, like just to compare. If you're not moving very far, if it's like a regional move, maybe it's $2,000 to $4,000, which is enough as it is, right? That's quite a bit. It's quite enough. If you're doing a cross-country move, it can be a lot more. It could be $5,000, $8,000, $9,000. Part of it depends on your stuff, how much stuff you've got. And it's very different too if you're just a single person without kids, dogs, cats. If you're not selling a house, obviously this can really escalate and get a lot more expensive. And with family and friends who are willing to help, you can knock down expenses. But let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, it's $2,000 to $4,000 for a regional move, and $5,000 to $9,000 for a cross-country move. This is encompassing all things like that I mentioned, like the U-Haul rental if you're having help with packing or moving, and deposits and licensing fees and anything else. There's like 100 little things that are going to come at you during this move, and they all add up. So you multiply that by 4, and this gets very expensive, right? And so here's what you do. Make it not a surprise. You know it's coming, and as I often talk with a lot of residents, it's so important to build a foundation of cash flow knowledge. Know where your money is going. It's a sobering exercise to go through because it's not a pretty picture, right? You got $3,500, maybe $4,200 a month in residency, and with the way that rent is and your loan payments, there's just not very much left, right? Now, I see some where the person is able to be very frugal. They live in an area where it's not super expensive to rent, and they're able to save $500 to $700 a month. In which case, that's great if you can. And you might be someone where that's your circumstance, or you may be more limited. You might be breaking even, or you could be going in the red, where you're losing money. You're burning through your savings. Regardless of your circumstances, it's good to plan this out, knowing, hey, I'm in my third year of medical school. I've got fourth year expenses. We haven't even, not even to delve too deeply into fourth year, because you've got ERIS application fees or another platform if you're in one of the specialties that isn't using ERIS anymore. And then you've got other fees associated with your application and registration. But then you have the move coming. You're like, I'm moving in 18 months. I'm moving in 24 months. How much is that going to cost me? How can I plot out a budget for that move? And what sort of cash flow do I have at all? Now, for medical students, you're not obviously making any income from school. Maybe you have some side jobs. I know some will do like an Uber Eats job, or they'll have some other temporary job just to earn some cash. Whatever your circumstances, if you do have the means to save something, just imagine if you were to save a couple $100 a month. In the course of 2 years, you got yourself $4,800 that could help to go toward fourth year expenses, including the relocation cost. Or as a resident, you get into intern year, and there's a lot of financial decisions that have to be made. Later on this spring, I'm going to be making a series of videos, a series within this podcast specifically designed for all of the financial decisions that new interns need to be making. And but that aside, new residents or interns, when you're getting into your new job and you start getting your first paycheck, making a cash flow plan, anticipating what is your next move after residency. It can seem counterintuitive because you're like, well, I just got here. But depending on the residency length, if you're in internal medicine and you're planning to apply to cardiology, 3 years is going to go by so fast. And if your ability to save is modest and you can't do a whole lot, like maybe $200 per month, I mean, you're limited, right? You got $2,400 per year that could possibly be saved. So the earlier you build a cash flow plan, the better capable you'll be of meeting those next relocation expenses. And so obviously if you're doing a cross-country move and it's going to be on the order of $5,000-$7,000 or something like that, maybe you can't save up for all of it, but could you save up for some? Try to do what you can. And this may sound like I'm being like it's conflicting advice, maybe, because I often talk about emergency fund saving for residents. Save $1,000 cash first, then 1 month of expenses. That's the scope that I usually go with for trainees as far as emergency fund building. Unless you've got a spouse who's earning a significant income, that may be all that you can do while you're in training. And here now I'm telling you, well, if you're going to be moving to fellowship, now you also need to be saving for this. In the end, cash is cash, and it's going to be used when things come up that have to be paid for. So it's not like you're going to build up an emergency fund and then you don't have cash set aside specifically for relocation. And so you're like, well, now I got to rack up credit card debt. No, you're probably going to dip into those savings, right? But that's because that's just your situation. Or, and if I may, this doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but what if you had prepared better? What if you had the circumstances to save more so that you could have set aside some funds for moving while also building up $1,000 in savings for emergencies? That's a separate fund, right? It's possible that some people have those circumstances, and the reason why this is preparation oriented and behavioral, because you know that you're going to be moving. Emergency funds ideally are supposed to be for things that you don't know are coming. I'm talking from a perfect world perspective, right? So again, I want to emphasize, I don't know, obviously everyone's different, and maybe you don't have the means to do both. $1,000 saved for an emergency and saving a couple $100 a month for next moving, relocation expense. So I don't want to come across at all like I'm trying to make you think that you can do something that you cannot do. You know what you can do. You know what your expenses are. You know what your income is. You got to sift out the numbers for yourself. But from a principled standpoint, from a behavioral standpoint, you know that moving is coming up. Act like it to the best of your ability. And if that means that you can't do anything more, then so be it. But run the numbers and see what you're capable of. I say this sometimes, and I don't know if it's helpful or not, but even if it's going to be bad, financially speaking, and you're going to have to go into credit card debt in order to move, one of the worst things in the world for us in terms of mental health as it relates to money is our imaginations. I'm moving and I have no idea how bad it's going to get. With a plan, even one that involves you going into credit card debt or into some kind of private loan situation, at least you know how bad it's going to be. I'm going to be $5,500 in debt as a result of this plan to move to fellowship. I've looked at every situation, every option or choice that I have, and this is my best case scenario. That's not great, right? It's not feeling like, oh, it's not a success. However, if you don't do that preparation and you don't look at what the layout is going to be, your imagination is going to do much more harm imagining like, well, maybe it'll be $8,000 or maybe $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 because you haven't looked at the numbers, right? And the event is coming regardless. So why not look and see how bad it's going to be? So even in this case, when you don't have the means to save a couple $100 a month as you prepare for the next transition, the knowledge can help you. It can help you to know this is how bad it's going to be. You know your boundaries. You know how close to the edge you're going to be. You're going to know what sort of hole you're going to have to dig out of as a new attending, but that knowledge can really help, just so that you stop wondering, frankly. It's really comes down to being able to control the information that you need to process. If you can proactively do this, you really help yourself so that you don't end up scrambling. You could even if you're in a situation where you're going to go into debt, you could be looking at 0% interest credit cards for a year, or looking at what the interest rates are on private loans or personal loans through like Laurel Road or American Express or SoFi, whatever, excuse me, whatever it happens to be, so that you're not just scrambling. All of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, these expenses I've got to put on a credit card and it's 28%, right? If you can control some things because you've prepared and you have the information, the right information, then you'll be better equipped. So many of people in medicine, so many physicians already face high risk of burnout due to the transience of life and career and debt and delayed financial milestones that matter to you. This is one way in which you can help yourself. And so if you do this, if you build up a little bit of savings, if you can, and allocate it, know like this money is for this purpose. Then as you get ready to fill out your fellowship applications, or you start applying for your new attending job, and those sometimes come with sign-on bonuses. There's some pros and cons to that we can talk about another time, but there are ways that can help with the transition. If you know what the costs are going to be, you are better equipped to make the related decisions around that. We'll talk next time.